A surprise visit has revealed a prison designed to help rehabilitate prisoners is instead keeping them locked down for up to 23 hours a day with little access to education and rehab programs. A report by the Chief Ombudsman into Auckland Prison has found 2 breaches of the UN Convention Against Torture and Cruel and Degrading Treatment, with an inmate being pepper sprayed even after he followed a guard's orders. Other failings at our only maximum security jail include high levels of assault, including sexual attacks, resulting in a number of prisoners requesting voluntary segregation to avoid bullying, standover tactics and gang clashes. Unacceptable ventilation and staff shortages are resulting in inmates missing out on medical appointments, parole and reintegration appointments. Well, joining me now is the Chief Ombudsman, Judge Peter Boshier. It makes for grim reading in part. How would you describe your findings? How bad is it?
It's a disappointing report, Lisa, and a disappointing situation. Look, we all know of the old Paremo, that prison had been around for a long time. This new $280 million facility, opened in 2018, was to be the dream for the future. This was to be the prison that dealt with New Zealand's hard criminals in order to try and rehabilitate. It's sadly not doing it. It really is just containing and not really achieving the goals it was set out for. So big challenges ahead, strong leadership needed.
So why hasn't the culture of the prison changed?
I think you can look to COVID-19 and lockdown as the start of prison guards' availability being reduced and a bigger lockdown regime being introduced because that was practical and pragmatic. Unfortunately, I think that's just continued. So what we found, I'll give you an example. In the high security unit, this is not even the most maximum, the prisoners there are locked up at 3 p.m. They have their meal at about 2:30 p.m. They're locked up from 3 p.m. until the following morning at about 8 a.m. You'll see that the chances of rehabilitation and reintegration are just so minimal when you're in your cell on your own for that period of time. We really need some strong leadership at the top.
There is a list of issues raised in this report, and I want to get through a considerable chunk of them. Assault rates, 35%. Sexual assault rates, 13%. How has this been allowed to happen?
The answer is, I don't know. I sense that one of the answers to increasing containment and inability of prisoners to mix with others, because the prison can't seem to allow prisoners to mix in a safe setting. It's true that 2 factors may have contributed, Lisa. One is staff shortages. The other is that the staff is all fairly new. Many have experienced less than 2 years in the job. It's only after a period of time, I would suggest, as a prison officer, that you learn how to manage and how to do it in a holistic way. I just think the prison has got some way to go before it's equipped to do this.
That can't be acceptable, though, in terms of the collateral damage to end up with 13% of inmates being sexually assaulted.
Well, it's the very reason that you hope you wouldn't send someone to prison for, and that is to make them worse. So I agree with you. And let's remember, it's worth restating that I'm talking to you in my capacity as Parliament's designated monitor of prisons to ensure that minimum standards are adhered to. It's an international covenant as well as a New Zealand domestic statute. We are not achieving what we are meant to in terms of our obligations. That's why I'm being fairly clear in my criticism.
I am interested in an incident which involved a pepper spraying of a prisoner. Can you just describe to me briefly the details in which this person was pepper sprayed? Obviously, they had an incident in their cell. They triggered the sprinkler system. But at the point this inmate was pepper sprayed, what was he doing? Right.
The prisoner concerned commented to my inspectors at the time that he had been pepper sprayed. They asked to see the footage. The footage showed that the prisoner had tampered with the sprinkler and retreated to the rear of his cell. The prison officers went into the cell. This is all from the footage. They demanded, as they were entitled to do, for him to comply. They said, get down on your hands and get down on your knees, put your hands behind your back. The footage showed the prisoner kneeling compliantly, putting his hands behind his head. He was then pepper sprayed. The prison officers wrote up a report on this and understated and minimalised what had happened. When my inspectors compared the footage they'd seen with what the prison staff had written up, the two did not reconcile. So there are two aspects about this. One was, on the face of it, the pepper spraying was gratuitous. The second was that the reporting was inadequate and unacceptable.
Isn't that a cover-up?
It's never acceptable when you depart from the truth. And one of the reasons I insist on accuracy myself is credibility. And that's the problem that prison staff will have. As far as I'm concerned, you establish credibility by being honest and transparent. It's non-negotiable.
But Judge, a departure from the truth in this instance is lies, isn't it? They told lies to give a different representation of something that they had been involved in when they acted inappropriately. By anyone's measure, is that not a cover-up?
Well, lies is a motive. Look, I would prefer you to form your own conclusion and your listeners too. I've given you the clinical explanation of what happened. The end result is not a pretty one.
Which leads us to the body cameras not being turned on at the start of incidents generally. Given the incident that you have just described in clinical terms to us, how much of a concern is it that prison officers are not turning their body cameras on at the start of incidents, and why do you think that would be?
If you look at just what changes have occurred, say, in the United States that we've seen since body cameras are being used, and the change in what we now see as actually happening with before what was represented as a story, we know how important body cameras are. I would like to see it routine that when a prison officer is beginning an interaction with a prisoner, the camera is turned on so that the important beginning part of it is captured. Let's hope that the use of body cameras in this setting becomes routine and unexceptional.
Do they not want a record of their actions?
Well, that's the question that you have to ask. And there are instances, aren't there, where someone claims something, and when you look at the footage, there's a different perception altogether. One person's perception of what they've done, for whatever reason, maybe their anxiety at consequence could lead them to minimalise what they did. I think the importance of cameras is accountability.
I note that your investigators had difficulty talking to a number of prisoners in the maximum security wing. They were forced to try and talk to them through food hatches. Again, given what you have laid out, do you think corrections were not keen on you speaking freely to prisoners?
The real problem, well, can I answer it in this way? It's consequence of not having enough staff and early lockdown. When, for instance, on my trip on the 1st of December, I spoke to a number of prisoners. I had to do that in some cases through their prison doors because by 4 o'clock when I was there, they had been locked down for already an hour. So whether it was an intentional distancing of the prisoner from my inspectors, I don't know. I would probably prefer it that the periods of containment in the cell are now so long it's difficult to get easy access.
Why are some prisoners in directed segregation, isolation in essence, for these extended stays? I think there was one prisoner, more than 400 days and no proper paperwork recording these durations?
Lisa, this is frankly one of my biggest concerns. I talked to 2 prisoners in Unit 10. They're not meant to be there in assessment for much of a long time. There's meant to be a process of working out for how long they need to be there and a plan. At least one of the men I spoke to had been in the situation for 18 months. I can't see how one is going to try and normalise a prisoner in that setting when you are in that artificial and pretty oppressive situation for all of that time. I really would like to think that, can we just talk about the prison scene. When 2 or 3 years ago the prison muster was 10,800, you could see that because of churn it was really difficult. It's now reduced to 8,300. I'd like to feel with that less pressure, there is the ability of prison officers to spend more time with prisoners and to enable their planning to occur in a more meaningful fashion.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is the Chief Ombudsman Judge Peter Boshier there, talking about, well, a report that stemmed from a surprise visit to our only maximum security prison, that's Auckland Prison, and 37 recommendations have come out of that report.